Well, good afternoon, social media and friends and family. I am Marnese Jackson, the Executive Director of the Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition. And our mission is to decarbonize the Midwestern building sector by 2050. And our focus states are Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, and Ohio. Woo! One day
Woo!
I'll just be able I'll be able to just say all of that without thinking the M's to come next, the I's come next. It's a lot to remember. But today we are resuming our podcast series, and I have the luxury of talking to some board members in this series. So that means these are my boss, but we don't work in a hierarchy type of way. But at the end of the day, I answer to a board of directors, and it's about 12 of them. And today we have Molly Janis, who will be joining us today. But just a little bit about Midwest BDC before I tell you about Molly. Midwest BDC was founded in the first place to make sure that we operate by the HIMAS principles for democratic organizing while eliminating fossil fuels in buildings before 2050. We also center our work around the people who have the most impacted by high energy burden and environmental racism. So it is awesome to have members of our coalition centering this work. But then also, we do have board members who are really moving the work forward. And so it's an honor to talk to Molly Janis today. And Molly is a sustainability scientist. We got to talk more about that. With 20 years of experience in climate change, energy, waste, and food systems. Okay, so that's across the board of saving the world, saving the environment, climate justice, climate change. And as a program developer manager with the Minnesota-based nonprofit Center for Energy and Environment, CEE, Molly develops and manages community-based building energy efficiency projects across the Midwest, including Minnesota, Michigan, and Indiana, our 8-state region. She co-founded and served on the CEE's first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council from 2021 to 2023, and wrote the company's first DEI policy in 2019. In partnership with the city of Rochester, Minnesota, and a group of 40 community stakeholders, she worked to create a community-based sustainability action plan. Yes, that is where is that sustainability action plans, climate action plans. Then she also took on this position in our board of directors last January 2023. So Molly, I said all these awesome things about you. Would you like to introduce yourself? And it's okay, Molly. You're talking to Marnese. Nobody can see you but me. So don't worry about it. But social media can, but don't worry about it. We talking today.
Thank you for that introduction, Marnese. It's great to be here with everybody today. As Marnese said, I'm Molly Janis. I use she, her pronouns. I work for an energy nonprofit called Center for Energy and Environment. We call ourselves CEE for short. And we're based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's where I live, in a house that I'm constantly trying to make more efficient for myself. I did a very silly video about that for my WBDC board interview. And so, like Marnese said, I've spent 20 plus years working on sustainability and climate change. And sustainability is described as a three-legged stool. You can remember it as like the 3 E's or the 3 P's: economy, ecology, equity, or people, planet, profit. And I've always felt, and I think it's really clear in how the environmental movement has evolved over my career and that of many people before me, that equity and people have gotten the shaft on that stool. And guess what? The stool tips right over if value people just as much, if not more, than the rest of it. So I'm happy to be here today and proud to serve on the Midwest Building Decarbonization Board.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being a proud member. And so how did you get involved with Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition?
So, like I said, CEE is a mission-driven nonprofit, and our mission is that we envision a healthy, carbon-neutral economy that works for all people. We specialize in designing energy programs and policies, and my job as the community program development manager is to one of my jobs is to spread CEE's work outside of Minnesota. So in Minnesota, we've been around for 30 years, and we have really deep community partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
As a white-led organization, we're growing in terms of our diversity of staff quite quickly, which I'm super proud of. But that doesn't mean that we can do very much without our partners. And so we have these really deep partnerships with organizations that serve different members of our community in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And from my perspective and my background, we can't spread our work beyond the borders of Minnesota without deep community partnerships, without hearing and understanding the people and the economy and the culture of the different places that we want to work. So that's why I got involved in Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, was to make community connections broadly across the Midwest.
Wow. And, doing equity work, and, I just mentioned the HMAS principles for democratic organizing, and that's all about building relationships. And I noticed that your team, you won the Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership Award for equitable planning and engagement. So that shows that you all are a testament to doing the work and engagement in communities. You want to tell us more about that award?
Yeah, so that we started that project with the city of Rochester, mm-hmm. Actually, like right when COVID was in the news as being a big deal in like Asia, and it had spread to Europe. Mm-hmm. And then I was literally like in the car driving down to Rochester, which is a couple miles south of us, with my boss at the time. And she's like, my husband's obsessed with this COVID thing. Like, what do you think? And I was like, I don't know. It sounds depressing. I try not to get stuck on the sad stuff in the news. But lo and behold, that turned out to be our only in-person meeting for the entire 18-month process, because it was like end of February 2020. And so just to emphasize the importance of community relationships, those relationships, we were really benefiting from the work that the city of Rochester and their partners had done to get out into communities and ask like, who are the community-based organizations that can speak to the Hmong community? Who are the community-based organizations that can speak to the homeless community? The disability activists. So they had done that work of kind of mapping the landscape of community-based organizations that needed to have a seat at the table if the sustainability and resilience plan that the city wanted to do was going to have legs and be equitable and actually represent the voice of the community. Mm-hmm. So they had done that stakeholder mapping. We came in and facilitated working groups across the different focus areas of the plan. And it took a long time, took longer than it would have if we had been in person, because it's a lot harder to form relationships virtually. And at the end of it, we had, next steps across like health and equity and climate change, local food, transportation, that really were developed in partnership between those folks that represent those three legs of the stool. The community was centered. We took a view of equity that basically, if you design programs for the community members that are the most marginalized, that have the most difficulty participating in programs
Mm-hmm.
because they lack resources, that is like the foundation for a well-designed policy or program or initiative. So the only way to do that was by centering those community voices and letting the more traditional environmentalists and drivers of the economy in Rochester hear from those people and take
Mm-hmm.
a backseat to those communities.
Mm-hmm. So I want to switch gears a little bit. You became a board member last January 2023. You are part of the inaugural board. So, there's a lot of transition when you're, and for those who don't know, Midwest BDC was under the fiscal sponsor of Minnesota-based nonprofit Fresh Energy. Kudos to all the work that they're doing. And we transitioned and got our own 501c3 and became official. And so there's a lot of moving pieces when you're forming a nonprofit. And what made you want to come on to be a part of the board of directors, especially an organization that's centered around lifting Black and Brown and low income communities up who are impacted by energy burden? But then also, I noticed when I was doing when I applied for grants and things of that nature, they want to know that the board is reflective of the community that we're serving, right? And so, what made you want to join a board that's centering Black and Brown individuals, and what do you feel your added value is and contributions to the board?
So, in all honesty, this is my first as being a member of a board of directors.
Wow.
I'm a newbie to this, and professionally, I wanted to see how nonprofits worked.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to get experience with some of the work that goes into starting a new nonprofit and transitioning, things like budget and staff from Fresh Energy to its own Midwest BDC 501c3. And so that it was, for me, there was a good chunk that was I want professional experience. I want to know what this looks like. I really wanted to be involved in bringing on the first executive director, which I'll say we knocked out of the park because Marnese, you are just such a great leader.
Oh my gosh, I'm not crying today. I'm not doing this. We're not doing this today, Molly.
We walked into an amazing nonprofit and staff, and so it's kind of funny because we spent months and months developing a job description, and and the answer, the awesome director was right there in front of us, and we knew it the whole time, but again, I was learning experience for me. How does this work, right? I'm sure it's for you as well.
It is definitely a learning experience. Right, because most people don't know that I've never been an executive director before. And when I came onto Fresh Energy, forming the coalition, that was my first director position. So, learning the ins and outs of forming a nonprofit, I have managed staff before. Managing staff is the easy part, actually.
A lot of people would disagree with you on that, but
I know, and people would disagree with me but I'm a good manager. Look, I tell people from the beginning, Maggie, okay, I know Maggie's on the back end. Maggie, I think I do okay. I'm gonna let y'all evaluate me because I'm very self-aware. And I like to improve and be better. I don't want to be that boss. People be like, I hate her. And, nobody's perfect. But, I prefer to leave that legacy of hey, my staff liked me. And that, I was helping with their career advancement. So I appreciate you saying that because coming onto a board with no experience and learning the different parts and moving pieces, especially when you're starting a nonprofit, is very valuable. So I wanted to know what is something people may not know about how boards contribute to an organization from your perspective, since you're a newbie coming onto a board of directors?
Yeah. And I totally didn't mean to dodge the centering black and brown part of the question, but we'll get back there.
We are coming back to it. I know.
We can't, we're not going to sidestep that as the MWBDC. But yeah, so one thing that I didn't know, and it's funny because I work for a nonprofit, you know, you just, as kind of a mid-level manager, you don't have to pay attention to how the sausage gets made. So I kind of haven't, but for example, it hadn't really sunk in that the executive director reports to the board of directors.
Molly, you're my boss.
I know.
Even though we don't use those terms, but you know, some people do. But you know, we try to stay. You know, but you know, that's just at the end of the day, I answer to all of you guys. You know,
and you have to be something else that I didn't know. And again, if I had really sat down and thought about it, I probably would have been a little bit more aware. But you know, you have to work as a board, especially a remote, and you've been working through these issues as a coalition director, you know, creating relationships and being very intentional about how you build a group and how you build a team is a lot harder virtually. And I think it's definitely been a challenge for me. I kind of wished that we had like a fancy boardroom, you know, that we all sat in and you know, figured out like who takes their coffee black and who puts cream and sugar in, and you know, get to know like a little bit of the ins and outs of people. But yeah, I think the intentionality around forming an effective group, an effective like leadership team for the nonprofit was something that I hadn't really considered, but it's obvious like how critical that is, especially when, you know, you think about, I really love managing people too. And I love the experience of helping people grow and, you know, coaching as opposed to directing and all that stuff. And yeah, it's just harder to do that in a remote situation, and also like in a group as opposed to a one-on-one, you know, boss employee relationship. So those are things that surprised me.
Yeah, it is really hard to build relationships, but you know, but it's just so more efficient. So I could see like your work style, like you're more of a personable, you would enjoy being in person majority of the time to get really connect from your stuff. So I definitely think a board retreat will be awesome alongside, you know, staff being there. So I think we got to put that in the calendar sooner or later, so we can better, you know, build our relationships. But I think since we're virtually, we have to use those old school practices of just picking up the phone, because, you know, things can get lost in translation. You know, as for me being a answering to 12 individuals, different personalities, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh. So, but I think about it like, hey, that's my skill set. You know, I'm a relator, I'm a connector. And so I have to navigate different types of personalities. So what is your favorite part about working with Midwest BDC since you became a board member or a member? Where do you want to see the organization, you know, grow into?
My favorite part is hearing from the diverse membership of the coalition, and for it to be my job, or at least I make it my job as a board member, to connect those different stories and those different missions, even just like the random questions about, you know, exterior insulation or heat pumps or whatever, everything from there to groups that are focused on air quality and asthma and public health, being part of the glue that connects the coalition together and being really intentional about making those connections, and really just seeing like what I think our collective movements like need to look like. They need to look like MWBDC. And it's been far too long that the environmental movement and climate movement have been, white led. That is not what the world looks like. The world is black and brown, and bringing together, the folks like people I work with, some of whom are super, into super PhD, research grants, looking at like energy efficiency technologies, energy storage technologies, electrification technologies, being part of the thread that connects that part of the movement to the people that we need to be focused on, the black and brown people. That's what really excites me about MWBDC, and that that I get to be a part of that from the ground up is rewarding, and that I get to bring some of the perspective that my colleagues who are crazy, amazing, smart energy nerds bring that perspective to that conversation, because everybody in every organization, needs access to technical expertise. But this gives us an opportunity not to drag the conversation. Whereas in my day-to-day at CEE, I feel like that technical expertise is still like the pinnacle of what we do. With MWBDC. It's not, it's one thread that goes towards making, the world a better place, making the whole better.
Yeah. So I know as a board member, you all have a part in shaping where the organization goes. So what do you wish people knew about energy and climate justice, or what is your utopia for Midwest BDC?
My utopia for Midwest BDC is that energy and climate, kind of like I was just saying, energy and climate change work looks like the MWBDC. It's a coalition. No one perspective or one approach wins. It's an all-in approach, and not in the ways that fossil fuel companies talk about it, right? They're like, well, you can't just, cut out natural gas. We got to use all the resources at our disposal. Well, from my perspective and from CEE's perspective and most members of our coalition's perspective, we don't agree. But what does that actually look like? How do we get away from fossil fuels? That's part of the challenge that CEE is trying to solve.
Right.
And we can't keep solving it in the same way, because the ways that we've been solving this as a technological challenge have left people behind.
Yeah.
We can't have, the middle class and the upper class neighborhoods looking all spiffy with their, fresh insulation and awesome, electric technologies, and meanwhile have people, as is very much the case in Minneapolis, people who live just across the Mississippi River without a single tree to shade their apartment building, just roasting in unhealthy buildings. Like that's not a solution. That's an experiment in one place and a bunch of people getting the shaft.
Right.
I think Midwest BWC and Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition is like we're working together to provide an alternative to that. It's an all-in approach on decarbonization.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it's not one way to get to the revolution, especially with the work that we do, is so many different moving pieces. So I really can wait to work alongside you more and get to know you more, Molly. So outside of saving the environment, climate change, climate justice, advocating for Black, Brown, Indigenous people of color, and, that's our from what I heard from the white perspective, that it can be a very taxing thing. But, as I tell our, our white brothers and sisters, Black and Brown people, that's our daily lifestyle. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter like where we come from, if we're affluent. It's all, we all experience white supremacy culture. And I know you probably have been to one of those trainings. And experience it in different ways. So we either perpetuate it or we experience it. So we just have to be more aware of how we continue to do that. So outside of work, what are some of your passions? What do you enjoy spending time with?
Yeah, and just a comment on what you just said. Like I firmly believe that we, like you were saying, like there's the analytical experience. You can look at the data and see the Black and Brown people have been left behind. There's the lived experience, of being Black, Brown, and Indigenous that the majority of our coalition has that I don't have. And then there's the fact that we need white people to step up. It's not it's not an option for me personally not to step up. So how do I blow off steam when I'm not trying to save the world? I love being outside. That's like always been kind of, wilderness and nature has always been my primary motivator for doing environmental work. So I like to garden, I like to hike, I like to take long walks with my dog. Even though he's getting old, he still loves it. And I love growing and cooking my own food. So that's a little bit about what I do outside of work. And I try not to worry about climate change all the time because I spend my work time doing that. I highly recommend this as a career path. Spend your 40 hours a week doing something good for the world so that you feel calm when you're off work, that the work is never done, but you've given it your all during your work week. And, now it's time to I don't know, prune some tomatoes.
I like the fact that you're living the lifestyle of an environmentalist, and centering yourself within nature, because we have to get back in nature. Otherwise, Mother Earth, is not going to be, we're at the tipping point, but we have to really appreciate her. So, Molly, I hate to end this conversation because I want to dig a little bit deeper into something that you said, but we can always have you back. So I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. And if you want to come back onto this podcast, just let me know, or we invite you back, because this is something that we really enjoy doing. Did you do okay? Did you enjoy it, Molly? Did you like it?
I did. Okay? You're such a great interviewer. I felt very comfortable. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So, world, sometimes people haven't been on podcasts, or they be a little bit nervous, but I'm, glad, Molly, you opened up. You did great. So I'll be talking to you soon, somewhere on Zoom, and hopefully we'll get to meet in person soon. So you have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next Zoom meeting. All right.
Bye-bye.